Okay, in this section we're going to build the base carcass. As you can see, 3/4 inch plywood I use for all the parts. It's just a fairly efficient use of material. And it's also very sturdy. I like to use 3/4 inch material also because I use pocket screws for joinery. It gives me plenty of material to grab a hold of. So we'll kind of walk through the components here. I've got two sides. Each side has a set of shelf pin holes that we'll have to machine. It's got a bottom that fits into a dado. That's glued in place. Top stretchers, you got a back stretcher and a toe kick board down below. These are all attached with pocket screws. Now you'll notice that the back stretcher here is a little bit wider. I like to make mine around 7 to 8 inches wide. Two reasons. One, it gives the box a little more rigidity in this stage. And two, once you have your drawers in place, if you use a back mount drawer slide that we're going to be using, this gives you plenty of material and plenty of room to adjust to attach those two. So let's head to the bench and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to lay out, do all my joinery layout while these panels are flat. One thing to consider if you're buying plywood, typically you can buy an A1 grade, which is a good one side. The other side isn't necessarily bad, but it may be discolored. There might be some of those football patches in it. So just keep in mind if these cabinets are for nice or for show, you've got an outside and an inside. So I've got my two sides. I'm going to lay out my toe kick. I'm going to lay out my shelf pin holes, and then I'm going to lay out my dado for my bottom, and then I'm going to machine everything. But it's a lot easier to do that when it's flat. First thing is the toe kick. Now I'm just going to use my square here, and I'm going to lay out a line on the bottom, 3.5 inches up from the bottom. Now toe kick, you don't have to put a toe kick on every single cabinet that you do, but if it's a cabinet that you're working at, you'll definitely want a toe kick because when you come up to it, your feet need someplace to go. All right, 3.5 inches up, and I put mine 2.5 inches. I'm going to lay this line out 2.5 inches in, and by the time I add the face frame to the top, I'm going to be plenty deep. And I'm simply just going to use a jigsaw to cut these out. I like to cut on the inside face because as the blade comes up, it's tearing the fibers. If it does tear the fibers, it's going to be on the inside, not the outside. Next step, I'm going to lay out for my shelf pin holes. Now you don't typically in a base cabinet, usually have one shelf, not always, but I like to provide a little bit of an adjustment in the bottom just in case you want to move it around. You don't need a lot of holes, and what I typically use is a jig that I've made. Just a shelf pin hole jig. I simply drill holes at the intervals that I want to space them at, and more often than not, these are jigs you can reuse for other projects, this is exactly what this is. I've taped off because I don't want to use all of these holes. First thing I want to do is I'm going to line this jig template up with the bottom of my cabinet, and I'm going to keep that on the same reference every single time, so I know that all my holes are going to be in the same level. I'm also going to set this back a little bit from the front edge, and to keep it consistent, I'm going to set my ruler at 2 inches and then position the template back, and then we're just going to simply clamp it in place. Now I'm using a Vicks bit, just a brand name, but this is a self-centering bit. It's got a little collar on there that fits the hole that I've pre-drilled here. Okay, now that I've got my shelf pin holes drilled in the base cabinet sides, and my toe kick cut out, the only thing left is I'm going to make sure or lay out for my dado and my bottom, where my bottom goes into. And I'm going to position that 4 inches up from the bottom. Bring that line over and down the face, so I'll know where to set up on my table saw for my dado. Okay, now I've got my dado set in place, and I'm going to adjust the height to 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to make a test cut. Okay, we can see that my dado is just a little loose, so I'm going to figure out which one of these shims needs to come off. And the way you do that is basically start taking shims off and fill in the gap, and when you find the culprit, then you know. I'm going to start by taking off the outside shim first, and we're just going to try that guy. Looks like we got a nice tight fit in there. Okay, now that I know I've got the dado set the way I want it, I'm going to move my fence over to 4 1/8 of an inch, because that's how far up from the bottom of the side that I'm going to cut this dado for the bottom panel. Okay, now that I've got my dado cut for my bottom, I'm going to leave my dado set up in the saw, but I've got one more thing to do on this. I'm going to cut a rabbet in the back of each one of these side pieces for my back. I'm going to use, obviously I don't need a 3/4 inch rabbet in the back necessarily for this application, but I am going to use a sacrificial fence so I don't have to change my dado set. I am going to cut a 1/2 inch wide rabbet. It's a little deeper. I'm going to use 1/4 inch plywood for the back. It's a little deeper, but what that allows us for is a little material for scribing to a wall. Now if you're in a situation where your wall is way out of whack, you may want to leave a little extra material. But I'm usually fairly confident a 1/2 inch is going to fit for most applications. So I'm going to set up my sacrificial fence. And I haven't not changed the height of the blade. I'm going to leave that the same. I'm going to set this to cut a 1/2 inch deep. Okay. The stretchers I'm going to use are made out of the same 3/4 inch plywood that the sides and the bottom are. And you know, it's good sturdy material, so there's no reason I can't use it. Now I'm going to use pocket screw joinery to attach these to the sides. Most pocket hole jigs have the same similar features that they have, but you've usually got a cam clamp that holds a piece securely in place while you're drilling. They also have several different holes for some of them have different holes for different thicknesses or different widths of material. The key thing with the pocket hole jig is setting the depth of your collar though. Some of the jigs come with these handy guides on them, but I've found that the easiest way to do it is just stick it down in the tool itself, and I like to leave mine about 1/8 to 3/16 away from the bottom edge. Often the screw is going to pull itself a little deeper, and what you don't want happening is when you're driving pocket screws into this, you don't want them coming through the side of your cabinet. So I'm just going to show drilling a few of these holes here from one of my stretchers. We'll do both ends. I am going to now attach the back top stretcher to the top edge of my back stretcher. And this is where the drawer guides are going to get attached to. You use this one to attach your top. It also gives lots of reinforcement to the box. Woo. Now we're ready to assemble this box, and I'm going to take you through a couple stages here. The first step, I like to use squaring braces to kind of help me hold these pieces in position while I'm fitting everything. And these are pretty handy little deals. There's ones you can buy on the market, several different manufacturers, or these that I've just made out of 3/4 inch plywood. They keep things pretty square. And it also is just kind of a third hand. So I'm going to slide my bottom into place here. Clamped in place. All right, I'm going to take my back stretcher and I'm just going to kind of set it here as kind of a leg to kind of give me some support while I stick my other side on. Okay, good fit. All right. I'm going to actually attach my top stretchers at this point. I'm going to screw them in place. This way I can clamp this sandwich together. Whenever you're using pocket screws, the key to that is really holding your workpieces secure. Otherwise, it'll want to walk around on you. Make sure your top stretcher is flush at the top, and this back stretcher is flush with the front of that rabbet right there. You don't have to worry too much about the top at this point. All right, now I'm going to do the front stretcher, same way as I did the back. Just going to attach it to the bottom panel right now. Clamp it in place. Okay, now that I've got the top and back stretchers secured to the one side, I can now add glue to my dado and glue and screw the rest of this box together. Okay, I'm going to apply glue in the bottom of the dado. All right, apply some glue to the top of this bottom piece here. That way I don't have glue dripping out of my dado all over the place. Place it over. One thing to think of when you're clamping big carcasses like this, especially dados and rabbits, is that you've got squaring braces here that are trying to keep things square. One thing you want to make sure is try to keep your clamp as parallel to the panel as possible. So any of that could make that rack out of a square. Okay, now we're going to secure the other side to the top and back stretcher. And again, make sure that's flush. It's flush on the top. Clamp it tight. And we'll screw it in place. Okay, I'm clamping the front top stretcher in place, making sure it's flush too. Drive a couple screws here. Okay, now I've driven my last screw in the top rails. I'm going to check for square real quick. And a good way to do that is just simply measure the diagonals. And if they're equal, then you're pretty square, which looks like we're pretty close. Your box doesn't have a lot of lateral support at this point, not until you get your face frame on. So, it can move a little bit, but it's probably going to be pretty close, and you want it that way, so you don't have to really tweak it when you're putting your face frame on. Okay, now that the glue has had a chance to dry on this, I can remove some clamps. Now I'm going to attach the toe kick. I like to put a toe kick backer in here. You have a decorative toe kick that goes over the face of this once you put multiple cabinets together, but I like to do this piece because it adds, one, a little more strength to the box, and two, it gives you a place to attach that decorative toe kick at the end. Same sort of attachment method. I'm just going to pocket screw it in place. I've added a little glue to the top edge. After I've got those screwed in place, I just throw a couple clamps on here so that has time to, glue has time to dry and set up and hold that bottom tightly to it. Okay, at this point, our main box is done, and we've got the template for the face frame, which is next. And I'm going to put the face frame together, and we'll show you how to do that.